Hey, I'm Amanda from Trifecta Fitness. We're proud to be Clarksville's new Get Fit headquarters. Trifecta Fitness is a state-of-the-art spin and strength training studio. Our spin studio is truly one of a kind in this area, complete with 20 state-of-the-art live fitness bikes and an incredible sound system. Our strength training is done in small groups of 6 or fewer, and all of our strength and spin classes are scalable for every level of experience. Come see us in the heart of Clarksville, just behind MAPCO at the corner of Old Trenton Road and Wilma Rudolph Boulevard. Call us for more info at 931-542-6265 or download our Trifecta Fitness app for a full list of upcoming classes.
All right. Welcome back.
MisFitNation, the MisFitNation show.
We are a show founded by a veteran and hosted by 2 veterans and a military spouse. Our mission is to get people to tell their stories to the world. If you're an author, share your tips with the Misfit Nation. If you're a musician or an actor, our audience needs to know how they too can get into the business. Coaches, we love our coaches. Come on and share your tips with the Misfit Nation to help them become better versions of themselves. If you are a corporate leader or an entrepreneur, come on and show how you did it and how hard you have fought for success. If you are a veteran, first responder, or Gold Star family, we would love to have you come on and share your story with the Misfit Nation. We always have time for you. If you're feeling down, alone, or starting to see the darkness, stop. Think about those who are around you. You are not alone. You will be missed. If you feel like your problems will be a burden to those in your inner circle or feel embarrassed, dial 988. If you are a veteran, take option 1. We need you to keep pushing forward. Don't make a permanent solution to a temporary problem. If you are a new listener, welcome to the Misfit Nation show. Be sure to subscribe to our show on your favorite podcast app. Also on our YouTube channel at @the_MisfitNation. Subscribe and click the bell to keep you up to date on our latest episodes and all of our news. You can also find us on Heroes Media Group and About Face Radio. Now, let's get to the show!
Surprise, Misfit Nation. Rich is unable to be here tonight, so I'm Jake, half the Tuesday crew, going to be in doing the show for you tonight. And hey, let's get started. I'm coming to you from Columbus, Indiana this evening, and tonight we have Jeff Panik. He's a financial advising professional, and he's got about 25 years of experience helping clients balance their present and future financial needs. Everybody loves money. You ought to get some advice on how to make more of it. His career path took him from his student loans being paid by the Army, which is a great if you're young and you have those loans. The Army's a good way to get them paid off. I had him pay off a few of mine, and now he is a financial advisor, and he helps people manage their finances and make more money. So without any further ado, let's get Jeff in here. Good evening, Jeff.
Hey, Jake, how are you doing? Thanks for the introduction today.
I'm doing good. Okay. You're welcome.
That's perfect.
I gave about the 2-cent version of it. So why don't you just take off and you start whatever you want to and how we got to where we are.
I'll give you the 50-cent answer or something of that sort, right?
Okay.
No, so you're right. I went in the Army after college. I graduated, and I ended up getting a letter from Sallie Mae, which, if you don't know, it's not a magazine subscription service. It's a loan servicer. So once you rack up a bunch of loans in college, they're the ones that come after you and ask for the money back and interest. And, at the point that I got the letter, really didn't have very much experience, wasn't sure what I wanted to do like a lot of kids, but I knew I couldn't afford I think it was $1,000 a month for the next 10 years. So, the Army had a program where if you go in, they pay off your student loans and you learn a lot along the way. So I went into it, went through the service and, getting out. I kind of realized when I was getting out, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do after getting out of the Army. And there was a firm that had a training program for financial services. I was always interested in it, but never really understood how to get into it or, the direction of it. And I went through their full training program. But as part of that, I really realized, really, I kind of say, managing finances is really like everybody starts at a different point. It's almost like a race, I'll say. It's a marathon, really. And, some people, their family, they have influences or mentors that can really help start them out in the right direction. And, if you don't have that, or if you get going in the wrong direction, or you just don't really understand, I was the first one to go to college in my family. And it's very difficult to kind of understand the moving parts of it all when, you're the first one really to experience it. And, I look back now and say, just because you get put in a bad spot doesn't mean you can't climb your way out. And, just because you may start a little bit behind in the race doesn't mean that you can catch up. And, as you mentioned, I've been in the financial services industry for about 25 years. And a couple of years ago, I decided to write a book. And I was looking at what topic to write on. And I started thinking about my past, how I was growing up and how I grew up, and really my lack of understanding for simple, financial topics, and decided to write a book on financial literacy for young adults. I think it's certainly lacking, and I would almost say it's a crisis at this point when you look at the credit card debt, the student loan debt, and really people just really being at a real disadvantage as it relates to being able to do, what we call home formation, where you start a family. It's difficult to start a family if you're in a studio or 1-bedroom apartment and you want to have 2 or 3, it's very difficult. And given the fact that we've had the great pleasure of experiencing inflation over the past few years, it used to be everybody didn't quite understand what inflation is. I think everyone does now, but it's very difficult starting out, especially when you're behind, I would say, the 8 ball, when you have a bunch of loans that you have to pay, in front of anything else in terms of savings.
That is that. I feel sorry for, I was glad that I was fortunate to neither one of my daughters had to take out any money for college. And that is such a blessing because
It is because, once, as I mentioned, that money, it's not just what you're getting out in principal that you have to pay back. A lot of times, in some cases, if you defer it out 20 years, in some cases you could pay double, or in some cases even triple the amount of interest, more than what you paid in principal. So, or what you received in principal. So, I wrote the book, and it really is designed to help someone starting out that really has no idea about things, whether it's, what does a check even look like, and how do you even write a check? Only about 22 of the 50 states have any sort of financial literacy course to graduate high school. But at the same time, on a consistent basis every day, you're forced to make decisions, what type of health plan should you pick? How much should you save? What about a credit card or a bank? All these things you don't really learn about. And, if anything, I would say consumer finance is probably one of the more important topics, and is probably the least educated upon.
It is. And you would think that somebody smart would say, hey, we need to teach folks some life skills. And
yes, well, and that's the thing, really. And, when I look at student loans and I look at college, and when I have people there's talking to their, young adult who's maybe 16, 17, 18, and is thinking about college, at that point, it's probably too late, because they've probably picked 2 or 3 places that they have their heart set on, and I say, really, it's a process really that needs to start really in middle school and work through, whether it's volunteering or finding a mentor, an area of interest. I always say, if you're interested in being a nurse or in the medical profession, maybe do some volunteer work at the hospital, because you may find that, you can't stand the sight of blood. In that case, it's probably not the best profession for you. So, the sooner that you can learn what's not for you, you can find something that works for you. And, I think the sooner that you can have a conversation about what is realistic, where you're going to go to college, I always, looking at community colleges, technical colleges, somewhere where you can go, where you can build skills and then transition potentially to a university, but not rack up all the debt along the way. And, I think unfortunately, there's just not really a whole lot of incentive, I think, for the universities, the education system really to promote that, because, the universities kind of control, and the credit card companies and the student, it's just really unfortunate in terms of, an individual being able to get information that I would say is objective, and not really getting clouded with a lot of the, the day-to-day commercials that you'll see on TV.
Oh, yeah, I completely understand that. And, like you were saying before, nobody, there's so many people with the mindset, hey, I got paid today.
Yeah.
And it'll be a Friday. And then by Wednesday, they can't buy gas to go to work.
Yeah, it's on the inflation side of things, it affects people, that have less more, because it's just, everything costs a lot more, and you have less to work with. And, and your income in a lot of cases hasn't gone up by the amount that the costs have. And, really that's why, with most people, the foundation that I always say, the most important thing that you can start with is really a budget as a framework. There's all kinds of different budgeting strategies. Really what you want to do is you want to find one that's comfortable for you, and you can stick to. Really, I say, like anything else, you want to have you want to create a habit and stay with it. And it's okay to look occasionally and make changes to it. But, really what you want to do is you want to pay yourself first, meaning you want to go to savings in most cases first, and focus on that. And I even say, well, if you're getting paid and you're self-employed, maybe set it up where you just sweep it over to a high yield savings account or a retirement account the day that you get paid. So it goes in and then is right back out. So you never see it,
Yes. And in your advice, we're going to get into that, when you're talking to people, do you tell them, like, hey, when you're looking for employment, or maybe as a negotiating, when you're negotiating with a new boss or something, if they match retirement funds or anything like that?
Well, it's fun. It's funny you mentioned that. So a lot of times I'll even suggest that to parents and grandparents. I really suggest, matching, if their young adult or young person is working part-time, it's not a bad idea to match it and say, well, I'll match whatever you put into your Roth IRA, which is typically a long-term savings vehicle. I'm going to match it. That encourages them to continue to save and hopefully develop that into a habit. I think anytime you can get additional savings that's coming directly out of your paycheck, and somebody is giving it to you, obviously, a lot of times there's things that are attached to it. It's a good thing. And really you want to take advantage of that, because in the long run, the more that you can put away, especially the younger you are at an earlier date, you have the benefit of compounding. And, time has a way, the more time you have, the more forgiving you can, whether it's investments, whether anything, you have a lot more room for growth and compounded interest over time. And so, I always say, whether it's an employer, whether it's a parent, and I even use the example, someone that's graduated college or high school that's starting to work, and if they're on their parents' plan, they can usually stay on it till age 26. So a lot of times what I suggest is, it's not really that much for the parents often to just keep the young adult, the adult child on the plan till 26. And what they need to do is say, well, we're going to keep you on the plan, but what you do is the money that you would have spent to the health plan that you're paying for, you need to put that in your 401k or savings account. Okay. If they can do that, that's an excellent way to have a good start and really get ahead in the long run, both for the parent, because they are encouraging, their young adult who's getting into adulthood to really focus on saving and start, getting a good start, because that's the thing with the student loans and debt. Unfortunately, a lot of people are behind before they even start the race.
Yeah, I completely understand that. You mentioned that I had a guy that I served with. He was a staff sergeant, unmarried, lived in the barracks, had a meal card, and the guy spent no money. Mm-hmm. And then one day he just decided, I'm getting out of the Army, and he had invested it wisely. And to this day, I don't think he really works a job.
No, and
He does what he wants to do.
No, and that's, and that gets into the other side of it. I mean, I think, you really want to give yourself the flexibility to work, and that's the thing about money and savings in the future. If you do things the right way and the earlier you start, you can put yourself in a position, where if you're working, you can do what you want, and that's really the thing. I see so many people that are working and are just, I would say, miserable. They're working to get to Friday, when the whistle blows, and at some point you really want to try to do what and it's just sometimes just a matter where you just don't have a choice. But if you can get down the road as you get closer to retirement, if you can have some flexibility, doing something that you enjoy, it'll not only put you in a better mood, but you'll probably live longer as well.
Okay. Let's talk about some different strategies out there for, investing or saving money. I've got a little list of a few. We mentioned a Roth IRA. Go ahead. Let's just talk some of the benefits of a Roth IRA.
Yeah, and it's kind of like anything else. There's advantages and disadvantages pretty much to anything that you do, and you want to make sure it's appropriate. And I've always said, when I started in the business 25 years ago, there really wasn't the internet, and it was like, if you wanted to get some information, you would have to like buy a book, really, or, you'd have to listen to the radio, listen to TV. Now, if you want to Google Roth IRA as an example, there's probably about 340 million hits on Google that you'll get. And so really what I look at a lot of times is, I always use the example. I could say, I have 100 people, and all 100 people have different circumstances. Very, very rarely do you have, whether it's a coworker, a family member, a friend, everyone is coming from different circumstances. So, a Roth can be an excellent long-term vehicle, especially the earlier you start saving, using it. But it's also mindful, like anything else. You want to make sure that, I tell people, really what you want to do, you always initially want to start out building a rainy day or emergency fund. And really, that's really your foundation, because, sometimes people will jump ahead and say, I'm going to do a Roth, I'm going to do this. Really, you want to have a high yield savings account that you can put money into, and really get it to about 3 to 6 months of your income or expenses. And once you have that, that's really where you can move on. And obviously, if there's matches involved where your employer's matching, you can fill that in, because you want to take advantage of that. The reason why I always suggest the rainy day fund or emergency fund first is, what I do is, I see a lot of people who put all their money in their 401k, Roth IRA, these things, but they don't have a fund that if the HVAC goes bad, they have blow like 2 tires, they have to get fixed. They have some issue that comes out of nowhere, a roof, it becomes a situation where they have to go either into debt, or they have to jump into those accounts, and then they have to pay, in some cases, taxes to get the money out. And so really, what I suggest is that really the emergency fund, rainy day fund, is the foundation really from what you work from. And as I mentioned, certain situations, like if you have an employer match, you want to take advantage of that, but you also want to be mindful that you don't put yourself in a situation where all of your money is going into simply one thing that in some ways is locked away for the future in retirement.
Okay. Now, you mentioned having a rainy day fund and putting it in a high yield savings account. What about what is your advice on just keeping cash?
Yeah. So, so my problem, most times people keep cash because they're worried about something happening to the banking system in a lot of instances. The issue with that, though, is if something happens to the banking system, what is the cash really going to be worth in the end? And I've seen over the years clients where they either, I've had people that have buried money. I've had people that have hidden the money. Invariably, they either can lose track of it, they have a health issue, and they just forget it, and their children are kind of looking for it or trying to figure out where it is. So, usually what I suggest is really, you want to understand, where you're putting the money. You want to make sure if you want it to be safe, FDIC insured, you want to make sure you stay in the limitations of that. And then really what you want to do is, if you're going to put a certain amount of money in there, like I mentioned, in an emergency fund or your operating account, you're going to want to make sure that the bank is paying you a fair rate. Because if you just take it to a large bank, a lot of times you'll put it in a savings account, leave it there, and it really won't draw any interest. You want to make sure you get as much interest as you can. Otherwise, you're just giving the money to the bank and they're just basically using it. So, I look at it and say, you want to have the money in a high yield savings, but you want to get something off of it. And usually I suggest, there's Bankrate, NerdWallet. There's a bunch of websites that you can go to. And oftentimes you'll find, you can look at the high yield savings accounts. You can find one that fits with your checking or operating account, we'll call it, at your normal bank. And usually what I suggest is, once you have your budget, you'll know what your expenses are, what you need to set aside monthly. Anything above that, when it comes in on your paycheck, you can sweep it over into the high yield savings. If you had some shorter term goals, like you may need to buy a car, you want to take a vacation, you may have a wedding, coming up. What you can do is have a specific bucket for that. As you get further out and you have those buckets built out, that's really where you want to look at your middle term goals as well as long-term goals going forward.
Okay. All right. Moving on. What do we look for in a 401k?
Yeah. So, it really what you want to do. And I always say, with a lot of these accounts, people, I say sometimes collect them like antiques. If you work at 4 or 5 places, you'll have 4 or 5 accounts. Invariably, some of them get left behind. And so, the one thing I always suggest for people is to make sure that you understand where everything is, your 401ks, where they are. A lot of times, if you leave your employer, really, if it makes sense, a lot of times you can just move it to the new employer as you can roll it into your new 401k in most instances. The benefit of that, you're kind of consolidating it so you can see it. You always want to be mindful of the expenses inside. The younger you are, the more you pay in expenses. It'll eat away the value over time. So, you just want to understand, really, you want to try to understand what you're investing in. There's what are called target date funds that are off of retirement dates. Some employers will have people that come in and help provide financial guidance. And there are some plans that will help you just say, turn it over to the plan and it'll be managed in an appropriate fashion by a fiduciary. Really what you want is, I always say it's a good idea at a certain point, really, to have someone look at it and make sure it's all tracking the way that you would expect. And what the other thing, it goes back to the, I would say, the eggs in one basket analogy. You always want to make sure that you're not putting all of your eggs in one basket, and you want to make sure you're spreading things out. And that's one of the ways that you can potentially manage risk with the 401k.
Okay. All right. Wow. Okay. That's a lot to digest. Now I've got another question for you.
I need to make some eggs for you then, right?
Do what?
I said, I guess you don't need any eggs. I don't need to make any. So it's a lot to digest. Yeah.
I've got 70 chickens. So, I don't need any eggs.
Yeah. I would say not. You probably have some fresh scrambled eggs. That's for sure.
Yes. Yes. You was talking about learning about money. I was kind of lucky. My dad tried to teach me a bit about it. And, didn't have the internet. He gave me a book.
Yes.
And I'm not real good at explaining it, but is the rule of 72 still a thing?
Yeah. So the rule of 72 in terms of doubling your money, it really is a matter, though. It's, nothing is really in a vacuum, we'll say. The market, if you're putting it in the stock market, it just doesn't move up at the same direction every year. It's kind of an ebb and flow. Really, the value with the stock market is if you're patient and you're a long-term investor, you're, historically have been very rewarded, and it allows you to really, in most instances, keep up with inflation. Really, it becomes an issue, though, just making, as you approach retirement, as an example, you just want to be very mindful that you're not taking on too much risk, because, you don't really have that much time to make up losses in most instances. Okay. With most people, it's really a matter of, I always say, really coming out of college, starting your adult life, is it's probably one of the most important times in your life from a standpoint of finance, just lining things up the right way and working forward. And the quicker that you figure out saving, managing debt, and figuring out the pieces, the more successful you're going to be in life. And, and one of the challenges, frankly, I always say that it's like most things, whether business, military, pretty much anything, everything comes down to communication. You have to have open, honest communication. Money, they can say, is the root of all evil. That's what is often said, because of the way it turns people. And a lot of times it's because of just lack of communication. And that, goes back to families. When you're initially getting married, starting out, you have two people that have, in most instances, they say opposites attract. So, most people are coming from they're not this exact same person getting together. So, they have their parents, they were probably raised them completely differently in a lot of cases. So you're trying to merge all of this, and invariably you're going to have some friction and conflict. And really, like anything else, it's really a matter of working through that in open communication. And that's even with young adults and children. In the book, I talk about, there's tips that I give that can try to help, raise a more informed young person, whether it's just, I use an easy example, everyone's always on their telephones. If it's Thanksgiving, the holidays, everybody's sitting around on their phone. One of the things would be just put the phone down, and play the game of, like, I use life as an example. Life's a great game because, it really is sometimes it's exaggerated where you end up with 6 or 7 kids in certain situations.
You got your little car all piled full of kids.
But you need to get an extra car, a tow, but it really, it can provide some lessons. And, and the other piece of that is if you can just talk to them and say, tell them stories. I mean, everyone really, for the most part, has a much easier time learning from other people's either missteps or stories where they learn from. And, you can be honest and open and talk about your mistakes. They're going to be much more open coming to you, and they're going to be, I think it'll be in the long run, it'll be a better relationship with, again, like I said, the foundation really communicating just about money, and just, nothing is perfect, and it's very easy to make mistakes at any age with money. And that's one of the challenges, with the technology, everything is out there. It's so easy to find things, but it doesn't always really apply to you. And unfortunately, a lot of times people are trying to sell, the only reason why you're reading it or it's on there is because they're trying to sell you something.
Yes.
And that's really, I see the biggest challenge, is really getting something that is objective, that can try to help get you to what I would call the finish line, whatever it is. Everyone has different, what their goals are, and I would say in a lot of cases, a lot of people don't even know what the goals are, so that's really another thing. You always want to try to define what your goals are. And especially if you're getting in a relationship or getting married, you always want to look and say, well, kind of merging things, understanding, if one of you, and I always say, even going into retirement, I have spouses that have been together for years. The kids leave, they're off independent. The spouses are sitting there, one may want to live at the beach and the other says, I'm never going anywhere. So it's really a matter of kind of planning out. It's really a matter of planning out and having, open communication with how you see your future.
You got to set your goals. And we had another guest a few months back. We were talking about money, and the way he looked at it, he said, money is a tool, and you have to learn how to use it correctly and maintain it correctly. And he said, if people do that, it's just, everything works better.
Yeah, it's easier, but it's like anything else it sounds easier than it really is. And, and unfortunately, the more that you get, the more distractions there are, and the more, especially if you don't come from a situation where you were taught the lessons that need to be taught, it's easy to get distracted, especially the younger you are when you come across money. There's a lot of people that can take advantage of you, and you can make decisions that, in 20 years you would just kick yourself for.
Yes.
But that's like a lot of things. So, again, I always say, it's easy to dwell in the past and look in the past. I look at it and say it's a rearview mirror. You really want to look forward. You can't go back and change time, or go back and say I wish I could have, should have. Really what you want to do is say, this is where I am now. This is what I can do that's realistic to get to where I want to be, no matter what that is. And different people have different goals, and it's a matter of doing what you want and understanding what you have to do to get to where you want to be, and no matter what that is, whether it's professionally, whether it's retirement, whatever you see. Different people see things differently, and you shouldn't want to do what someone else wants to do just because that's what they say is the best thing.
Okay. All right. Now, okay, we've talked about IRAs. We've talked about 401ks. We've talked about having a high yield savings account. Now, what about, I hear a lot of things around people talking about annuities.
Yeah. So it's like anything else, I'll say. So, it's like too much of anything isn't a good thing. And you want to understand what you're using the vehicle or device for. Okay. It's like a wrench with this. You don't want to try to put a screw. You don't want to put a screw in with a hammer, because it's going to good luck trying to get it out afterwards. And that's really a way a lot of these products are. You just want to really understand why the person, if you're going to someone and they're suggesting you doing it, why they're telling you, why that's their recommendation and why it's best for you. And you really, I always say, if you can go to someone where they can give you 2 or 3 different options or doors to go through, that's really what's optimal, where you understand and make an informed decision. So you're just not left with something that you're sitting there trying to figure out how to get out of down the road. It's like, I would say, like a timeshare as an example.
Oh, yeah.
So, it's,
we had a coworker with one of those, and he was always trying to dump it.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I think like anything else, there's certainly appropriate in certain situations, but it has to be the right set of circumstances, and it has to be based on your individual set of circumstances. That's why I say, like, a lot of times I'll use the example of Social Security, which is a good example. People always say, should I take it early? Should I wait till full retirement age? Should I take it at 70, which you can get extra credits for? Well, that really depends on your specific family circumstances. If you're still working, what your other income is, what your life expectancy or what you would expect it to be. And whether sometimes people have to take it because they have health issues and they just can't work anymore and they need the income. So, I think it's like a lot of things. Really, you want to get it down to the point where you can understand whether it's Social Security, all these things, where how is that going to affect you, and what is the best decision for your individual family circumstances, not your coworker, a family member, or a friend, because oftentimes they have a completely different set of financial circumstances and family circumstances there.
Yeah. My dad, he kind of drilled it in my head when I was young. He said, son, they've got Social Security now. He says, but by the time you retire, he said, it probably won't be around. So I've always planned that. I've never planned for having it. So yeah.
And I think I look at it and I think, there's things that certainly can be done to fix it. So, my issue really with people is that, like you mentioned, the 401k, the Roth, what you want to do is you want to have multiple, we'll say, buckets where you can take money from in retirement. So you're just not taking it all from one type of vehicle, like a 401k, because, if you need 5,000 in income, you have to withhold, a certain amount of tax to pay the tax, because it's tax deferred. So you may have to withhold $6,500, $7,000. So you may think it's going to last a certain time, but what you want to do is give yourself flexibility so you have multiple places to pull money from. And by doing that, you have much better control, and hopefully, you'll have more money, when it comes time to pass it on to your family as well.
Okay. All right. Yeah, that's what I tried. I've got some money in an IRA. I got some money in a 401k, some in some stock, some in some utilities, and then a savings account. And I hope that'll keep me covered.
Yeah, and and one of the things I always suggest really is, one of, and I brought up the old accounts, you always want to occasionally look at everything and how it's all working together. And as part of that, if it has a beneficiary designation, it's always a good idea to make sure your beneficiaries are up to date. If there's ever a life change or a family change, you always want to update those so that it can go to the person that you want, not, whoever the court says in certain instances.
Okay. Now, what do you advise on life insurance?
Yeah. So, life insurance, it really is dependent upon your circumstances, like a lot of things. This gets back into, I've always said, if somebody says this is the greatest thing since sliced bread, you probably want to run from it.
Mm-hmm.
And, I look at it and say, there's term insurance, there's permanent, there's all types of permanent. Really what you want to do is find, and I use the example of, people approaching retirement. One of the biggest issues that people are going to have down the road is healthcare, long-term care costs. So in a lot of cases, I look and say, well, you really want to understand what potentially your long-term care costs are going to be and how best to manage that. You may self-insure, meaning that you can just pay out of your assets, but you need to understand what they are, because outside of education, that's one of the few areas that we see typically go up by 5 to 7% a year. But, certainly with life insurance, if you have a business, if you have real estate, things that are going to be more permanent, that you're going to have, where you're going to have to deal with potentially transitioning down the road, you're more than likely going to want to have something that's permanent, that's just not temporary. And, the benefit of term, you can get typically a lot of it for not very much, especially when you're starting out, which really allows, if something, God forbid, happens, your family to be covered, where they can be taken care of, if you've gotten the right amount, if it all works together.
Okay. And I kind of figured, since I'm working, I figured it up. I do 1.5 times my salary is what I get covered for. So,
yeah. And really, I look at it almost like you have to look at your debt, and you have to look at what cost, from the standpoint of children, what the cost would be if you still have children that are dependents. And then, even if you don't have the dependents, you want to say, well, if your spouse is working, if there's something that's sudden that happens, they're probably going to need to take some time off. If you have that cushion where you have that coming, if something, God forbid, happens, it goes a long way in a time where, that's the last thing they want to do is thinking about, that's the last thing they want to do is probably be somewhere working when they're trying to get, grieve and get through everything they have to in the event of death.
Yes. Okay. I got a couple more questions now. Crypto.
Yeah.
What's your advice on investing in crypto?
Yeah. So, we don't really give any advice on crypto.
Oh, okay. All right. I didn't know whether you.
No. So I don't really give advice on it. I would just understand that, it's extremely volatile. And it's one of those things where you want to understand kind of what you're putting it in, where it is, and understand what part of it is. It's like a lot of things. You just want to be very mindful that you don't put too much of anything in one thing, and that would definitely be the case with crypto. And I'm not giving any advice on it, but again, you just want to be mindful that that's not good. You don't want it to make that your retirement plan where you're all in with that. You want to make sure you definitely do other things and focus on the long term. That's usually what I kind of suggest with that.
Okay. Now, long term, as far as looking after your family when you're gone, trust or will?
Yeah. So, what I always suggest, and no matter where you are in life, whether you're starting out or whether you're, retired, you always want to have a will. And there's even parts of the will that people never think about. And I'll use the example of a financial power of attorney. It's typically part of an estate document package. And the benefit of the financial power of attorney is if I walk outside and I get hit by a car, but I don't get killed, and I can't communicate, can't use my hands, I'm not sure where I am, or even if I have a stroke or something, whoever I name as the financial power of attorney can come in and pay the bills and take care of everything. If you don't have that document, it is very difficult. You have to go to the court typically, and you're going to have to become a conservator, and it's a whole process, and there's cost with that. It's something that's very simple that can be set up. But as with the estate documents, over time, times change, things change. You want to make sure you update the documents accordingly. You want to make sure you take into account that if you did the document 20 years ago, it's probably a good time maybe to update it. And we say, you can go directly to an attorney. You can do the DIY, do it yourself. There's a Legal Zoom, there's wills and trust, there's estate and there's a bunch of them. But really, the more complicated your situation becomes, it's definitely a good idea to consult an attorney or someone that's a professional in that area to make sure that you're making the right decisions and you don't create more problems than you started with. And, I think it's very important for everyone to have a will, a document, no matter where they start out. I'll use the example, there was someone that I knew, wasn't a client. It was a friend when I was starting out after I got out of the military, and he met someone, they were engaged, living in a townhome. He had a dog, and so the dog, he ended up getting in an accident, passing away. And so, his intention was obviously for the dog to go to his fiance because, they lived together for about 4 or 5 years, but it ended up the family ended up taking the dog away from her, because they didn't have, she was nowhere in any of the documents or anything else. They never were married. And so the dog, the townhouse moved out. It was just, so you want to be mindful that, by doing the documents, taking the time on the front end, you can avoid a lot of pain and a lot of conflict. The other thing I see with the estate planning or looking at estate planning is, I always say a good idea is really once you have all the documents in place and you have adult children, really it's a good idea. It can be difficult, but to sit down and really have a family meeting and just talk about, what you're doing and explain it to them, because typically everyone takes their own position when something happens, if it's not spelled out ahead of time. And I use the example, if you want to give jewelry to someone, you need to put that down because it's probably not going to get to that person. And so, it's like the more that you can do on the front end with these things, the more conflict, and especially with families, that you can avoid after the fact.
Yes. Yeah, and I'm sure everybody's got a story of an argument at a funeral.
The funeral, during time, it's like, unfortunately, like we said, they say, money, like we talked about, is the root of all evil. Unfortunately, a lot of it comes down to just miscommunication and people not communicating properly, and then people just digging in. And it's not even always money. It's a lot of times just sentimental value. Yes. I've had siblings where, especially with over a necklace, where they would fight to the death, even if there's really no value for it. It's just a matter of the sentimental value of it is above anything else.
Yes. Well, Jeff, we're getting ready to wrap up here. I got one more question for you. We ask this of all of our guests. Let's just set a scenario. Let's roll back the clock and let's say I'm 23 years old. I just graduated college. What would be the first 3 things that you would tell me to be successful with my money?
Yeah. So I think that the first thing I would do is start saving. Then I would set up a savings account and I would start funding it, moving into, we talked about a Roth IRA or another investment, and just focus and just do that and just make it a habit. And if you do that, the amount of compounding and time that you have at that point, 50 years, 40 years, we would say with Social Security and some of those other things, if you're 23 now, you'll probably have to work to 75 to get Social Security. So, really it's a matter of, starting early. The earlier you save, the better. That's the first thing I would do. The second I would suggest would be just to take a step back and maybe just take a trip and travel and see places. I think one of the best things you can do if you have the opportunity is travel and to see other places. I mean, one of the things about the military, you know, the first time I was on an airplane was when I was going to the Army. I was going to Fort Sill. So that was the first time that I was on an airplane. So yeah, in January. So, you know, but you know, I went to a lot of other places afterwards, and I realized, you know, people get so upset with here and there and, you know, what's going on here. But if you go to other places, you can realize how special the country is. And I think the earlier that you understand that, I think the more that you can appreciate, you know, the land that we have and the great country we have.
Okay. All right.
And then I would say maybe the third would be, you know, really try to find a mentor or someone in your business that you can just ask to lunch, and just where you can just ask them to lunch, try to learn as much as you can from them. And you can, you know, they'll be more than open to tell you about all the mistakes they made, and you can probably learn a lot from that.
All right. Now, if I want to make use of your services, how do I get in touch with you?
Yeah. So you could go to my website. It's balancewealthpartners.com. And you can also Google me, Jeff Panik. It's with a K. So it's kind of a unique name. We'll, you know, try not to panic. And you can also, my book, which is right here, I have it up here. But you know, for someone that's looking to get some information on financial literacy, just kind of setting up a blueprint for themselves in direction, I think it could be an excellent book to kind of look at. And it's on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and everywhere that books are sold.
Okay, so you can get the book at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and that was balancewealthpartners.com?
Correct.
Pop that up there so everybody can see it.
Perfect.
All right. Got any parting words for our listeners?
No, you know, I would say sometimes, you know, my suggestion with a lot of things these days is whether it's the news or whether it's just the day to day, I think it's a good idea always to step away and just spend some time with your family. And I think if you do that, you know, you'll appreciate things and not get so caught up in the day to day politics of things.
Yes. I have a good friend of mine that's he's Amish. And I asked him, because he always looks happy all the time. And I asked him, why are you always so happy? He says, I don't watch the news.
Yeah. That's my prescription today for anyone, is just don't watch the news. You know, read a book or just spend time with your family. Either one you'll get more satisfaction out of. So
yes, you will. Well, Jeff, thank you. I hope everybody got some insightful ideas. You know, I want everybody to be rich. I wish everybody had money. And I want to thank everybody for watching tonight. Misfit Nation, we love you. Rich will be here Sunday, so everybody just calm down. But yeah, we're going to get off of here and sign off, and we'll see everybody later. Jeff, you want to hang out in the green room for a minute?
That'd be perfect. That'd be perfect.
All right.
Thanks so much.
Yeah. We love you, Misfit Nation. We'll see you later.
Thanks for checking us out and being a part of the Misfit Nation show. Don't forget to visit our website at themisfitnation.com. That's themisfitnation.com. Check out all our past episodes and get some of the great Misfit Nation gear for you and your family. As always, be humble, stay hungry, and keep hustling, because we are
Misfit Nation. Misfit Nation.